Good morning. Here we are with Pablo from EIT Urban Mobility. I almost said it in Spanish. Today we're doing a quick sort of Q&A session revolving EIT Urban Mobility, and specifically a line of investment that they have of 100,000 euros that Pablo will explain in a second in more detail. Just to give some background as to why we're doing this and who's doing this today, apart from Pablo and myself. I'm doing this on behalf of the Connected Mobility Hub, which is an association that I co-founded about 6 years ago with Sergio Diaz, who at the time was working at Renault in the innovation department. And today it's an association of just over 190, I think it's 194 smart mobility startups from across Europe. We're particularly strong in Southern Europe, and particularly within Southern Europe, in Spain. And as part of what we do at the Connected Mobility Hub is supporting it's all focused on supporting the startups. And part of that is supporting them with corporates and open innovation projects. Part of it is supporting the networking, part of it is supporting the communication events. I think yesterday we were organizing an event with Mobility City in Zaragoza, for example, and part of it is supporting the startups with regard to investment. And that's what we're here for today. I actually deal with investor relations. Indeed, if you are an investor or a startup, we have a face-to-face. It will be hybrid, so it will be online as well. We have the face-to-face investor event coming up at the end of September. And if you check out our website, Connected Mobility Hub, I'll put it on screen in a second, you'll see all the details. So Pablo, good morning. Sorry about keeping you there waiting for a couple of minutes. If you could, just before we get started, if you could just describe yourself or very briefly and let people know what EIT Urban Mobility is, because for those of us in the sector, you're very well known, but perhaps to some people who know.
Absolutely. So thanks a lot, Tom, for the introduction and for the efforts for running this event. I would like to actually share my presentation so people can actually accompany during this little introduction to the EIT world. So can you please confirm, Tom, that now my screen is visible?
It's on the screen. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
So just before you start, just one thing. To let the audience know that this is an open Q&A session. So any questions that are received during the question, we will put on screen and we will answer as the questions arrive. So please feel free to ask your questions. Now all yours, Pablo, sorry.
Thank you, Tom. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. And without further ado, I will actually introduce my role at EIT Urban Mobility, which is the investment manager. In a nutshell, the EIT world is actually composed of 8 different verticals. This was actually created back in 2008, and we actually are trying to solve the most pressuring challenges to make Europe a greater place to live. So in that regard, we have, as I said, 8 different divisions, one which is climate kick, digital, EIT food, health, energy, manufacturing, raw materials, and last but not least, EIT Urban Mobility. Our division, our organization was actually starting its operations back in 2019, but we only started to provide startup support programs and investments last year in 2020. The core of our organization is actually its network, and here we are actually really strong, not only when it comes to actually private organizations, but also the engagement and the actual support from municipalities and cities all across Europe. And this is only a number of organizations that are partners of EIT Urban Mobility, which encompass universities, knowledge institutions, industries, and of course, a lot of municipalities, cities, public organizations, and last but not least, startups and scale-ups. So delving into the startup investments, which is the primarily purpose of running this Q&A session, and the startup investments 2021, this is the actual second edition that we are running this year. It's actually targeting startups and scale-ups which are currently fundraising or that will close their funding round in the short term. This is actually for companies incorporated no more than 10 years ago with less than 100 employees in their payroll and that are contributing to at least one of our key strategic areas. And these are urban air mobility, waterway transportation and water logistics, connected vehicles, mobility and energy, autonomous vehicles and systems, mapping and navigation, census and training data, mobility services, vehicle marketplaces and aftermarket, smart cities and smart parking, and last mile delivery and green logistics. Of course, if your company has a solution, a product, a service, or a technology that has applicability in either of these focus areas, then you are more than welcome and of course encouraged to apply for our ticket. So how we do actually structure these startup investments? We have three options. And here, Tom, I'm not seeing the chat. So if there is any question, please let me know and I will make a hard stop. So
I will too. I'll put them on screen actually when they arrive. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. So we actually are quite flexible when it comes to realizing the investment. And therefore, we have three primarily instruments, which is equity investments, where we actually just set up and agree upon a term sheet. Then we have convertible notes and also safes. In order to become eligible to participate and receive the funding, the company pre-money valuation has to be below 8 million euros. And our ticket size is as well flexible, but normally we either agree on a 50K or a 100K. The company, to be eligible for funding, needs to be registered in Europe or in Horizon Europe associated countries. And there, if you want to know which are the European, the Horizon Europe associated countries, please just quickly perform a search on Google and you will be redirected to the European Commission website where you will see all companies associated to Horizon Europe.
Pablo, just one question. So you say that the pre-money valuation of the round has to be less than 8 million. Is there any limitation on the size of the round? So if you're putting in 100K, could it be 110,000 round, or is there a sort of a minimum that needs to be raised from other parties? And is there a maximum size of round that you get involved in?
Good question, Tom. So basically, what we actually want is to reach an equity ownership of at least between 2 to 5% of the actual cap table. So in that sense, we won't mind to be partaking in funding rounds up to 1 million, 2 million, as long as we can actually hit our equity sweet spot. So there is no limitation per se, as long as we can still own let's say a minority share in the company, but of course it has to be somehow, as I said, between 2 and 5%, which is our equity sweet spot.
Okay, and then in terms of the minimum, so if you're putting in 100K, could it just be 10,000 from I don't know, business angel that you were co-investing with?
Yes, we will. We are not intending to lead the round, but of course we can actually join the existing terms on a pari passu basis. So if there are other investors which have committed, let's say that a number of angels syndicate, each one pouring a ticket of 10K or 20K, we can still join the round, regardless of whether there are like a smaller capital committed to the ongoing funding round. So we are happy to actually invest with a larger ticket in comparison to the rest of the co-investors in the round, as long as they actually syndicate and the total capital committed represents more than 30 to 40% of the total funding round.
Okay, all right. Okay, cool. That was my question for the moment. You carry on. There are no live questions for the moment, so please carry on with it.
Thank you. So just like to illustrate and shed some light on our actual investment process, what we normally look for is for deal origination, and this comes from two main channels. One, which is internal, because at EIT Urban Mobility, we also run a startup support programs by Accelerator, which is targeting companies in the TRL from 4 to 6, and also targeting more mature companies, which are scale-ups, which are supported through the Scale Then Global. I will actually make a hard stop to explain those two programs by the end of the presentation. So these are actually the internal channels that we actually have to cherry pick the top performing companies that have graduated from our business creation programs. And also we are looking, and of course, like the case of Tommy with Connected Mobility Hub is a great success case, because of course we are eagerly looking to co-invest with top tier early stage investors in a pan-European level. So that is also. So, okay, and so Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, Pablo. So yeah, I don't know if you can see the screen at the moment, but there's a question came in from Miguel Angel Figueroa about co-investments in early stages. If there are investors that are able to co-invest with yourselves. So if there's, I assume the question, Miguel Angel, if it's not what you're asking, then please let us know. But I assume the question is, if there's an investor that's investing in a smart mobility startup, how do they get in contact with you to say, look, we're investing, would you guys be interested in co-investing?
Okay, thank you. So Miguel Angel, I will normally request them to make a warm introduction through email, but we will still ask the company to submit the full application details using our Typeform link. So we are, as I said, glad to receive a warm introduction and regarding and the introduction to the team, the current funding parameters of the ongoing round. But of course, the ultimate step is to actually apply using our application form.
Fantastic. And then there's another question here, which is the criteria for the investment documented somewhere so somebody can check it for further references? I put on site on the screen a little while ago the website of EIT Urban Mobility, but if there's a specific URL, that might be worth.
Yes, absolutely. So Tom, I actually have two additional documents as part of this presentation, which are the Q&A and the one-pager. So if you want, after we actually conclude the presentation regarding the investment process, our actual added value in addition to the capital investment, then we can actually, open it and share that lively.
Okay, fantastic. Cool. Okay.
Great. So I will actually continue very briefly with the actual deal flow screening, because as I said, just to sum up, we have the internal deal flow origination coming from our own business creation programs, but also looking to co-invest with early stage investors at a pan-European level. So if you are a business accelerator, an incubator, a venture builder, a seed fund, a venture capital fund, and you have any hot prospects in the pipeline or portfolio companies which are currently fundraising, please reach out to me and I will be more than happy to actually have a look at the proposed deals. After this internal evaluation, we have now 3 additional steps, which is the investment committee evaluation, where we actually invite third parties to join our investment committee. And this is primarily composed of industry experts in the field of tech mobility ventures, and of course, venture capitalists, which are investing in this particular domain. After the investment committee makes a recommendation on the actual top, let's say, selected companies for investment, we actually handle the deal structuring, whether this will be the most suitable investment mechanism, which can be, as we discussed, a SAFE, a convertible note, or pure equity investments. And last but not least, we will have investment and post-investment support. And what does it mean? We will actually allocate one of our internal resources as a business coach to monitor and to support the ongoing efforts when it comes to introductions to our core partners, any further fundraising support, and so on. So our involvement is not purely a financial investment. We also engage and support and nurture relationships with our companies in the long run. And this is...
Sorry. Okay, you're about to say it. Brilliant. No, I was going to ask for some more specifics on that. Brilliant. No, I leave it to you.
Thank you, Tom. So basically, I will not dedicate so much time to this, but the added value goes way beyond pure capital investments. And therefore, we actually provide support in terms of the company structure, because some of the companies we have invested in didn't even have a company registered by the time of the application. So our legal counsels can actually help entrepreneurs to structure all internal processes of the company, including the financial, the legal, and operational issues. And I think that this has a tremendous value in order to mitigate and to avoid the most common pitfalls when it comes to actually setting up the shareholders and the cap table, the equity allocation, and so on. In addition to the company structure, we also provide strategic advisory, because despite of not getting board seats, we actually are hands-on and we really focus on growth strategy and internationalization because of the vast amount of resources that we have throughout our network. In business development, we also have an extensive network with where we actually provide fast-track access to our stakeholders. And this is actually represented by, for instance, running pilot projects with municipalities to actually develop ad hoc commercial agreements with them. So in the case of, for instance, one of our equity portfolio companies, which is Via Nova, they are working now with the municipality of Milano to actually integrate a mapping of services for its citizens to actually commute within the urban city in the best sustainable and less, let's say, aggressive way to reduce CO2 emissions and to become more green. In terms of financing, we actually, as I said before as well, we actually support fundraising activities through our program Access to Finance. So if a company that has actually been funded by EIT Urban Mobility requires follow-on funding, then we can also help them to actually, track and schedule activities with selected investors from our partnership. And this includes corporate venture capitals, venture capital networks, and other financiers. And last but not least, of course, we actually provide them with access to exit and investment support, building early relationships with corporates and key top executives, like simulating like traditional M&A processes.
Brilliant. I didn't want to stop you while you were on the screen, but Agustin has a question. I think you've just answered it, to be honest with you. But he says our company has developed a system that solves the last mile problem in the delivery of large materials. Where do we get partners and investors? Can we have access to partners and investors through EIT Urban Mobility?
Sure. So, Agustin, thanks for the question. There are two ways to actually get partners and investors. The first one, of course, is getting investment from our side. If you submit your application, you become eligible, and you are actually selected for investment after this rigorous process that I have just illustrated before. And second, there are two additional, let's say, calls for companies depending on their maturity level to actually become involved with business creation at EIT Urban Mobility. One, the Startup Accelerator, which can have both a thematic and a regional approach. And second, by the Scale Then Global. So in total, I will actually sum up that you have three options. Investment, so you actually become part of the family. Second, you actually apply and get involved in the Startup Accelerator. Or last but not least, if your company, let's say, is qualified as a scale-up, then you will have to apply to Scale Then Global and then become involved after the selection process as well. And Tom, I'm reading a second question here from Pedro.
Yeah, I've just put it on the screen. There we go. I didn't know if you could see the question, so I was waiting till you finished to put the next one.
Thank you, Tom. Very useful. So, Pedro, if you have actually identified all lead type of clients, of course, we can actually help you to somehow classify and set up a funnel process to increase the odds of getting them acquainted. So we normally target primarily, as we said, B2B and businesses, which are primarily corporates, and second, municipalities as well, to work with them using this fast track that we provide in order to somehow develop ad hoc solutions catering to their own needs. But of course, we actually, I can share this presentation later after the termination of the session, so you can actually have a look at all our core partners.
Fantastic. We leave you to continue then.
Thank you. So I'll come back to the next slide, and this is where we actually discuss the three different programs. So the first one is actually accelerator programs. We currently have 5 accelerator based in the location of our innovation hubs. So we have one in Helmond for the west. We have one in the north where it's in Copenhagen. Then we have one in Central, which is in Munich. And then we have also the one for the East in the heart of Europe, which is Prague. And last but not least, where our headquarters sits, which is in Barcelona. So we have 5 different acceleration programs. And again, I eagerly encourage companies to not only think on a regional level, but also on a thematic level. For instance, if you are, let's say, operating in the waterway logistics, and then you really want to nurture your relationship with the key stakeholders in the north, regardless of whether you are from Germany or whether your company is Spanish, you can actually apply to be supported by the Acceleration Program North. So this is important, and if you have any specific questions, I'll be glad to take them after this session. And again, just moving on, we actually have the Scale Then Global, which, as we said, is targeting more mature companies. And the main purpose of this program is actually providing mentoring and support to both scale and internationalize. Since the beginning of this program, we have actually supported 20 startups, and then we actually run pilot projects in which we invest up to 50,000 euros to run a specific and tailored pilot projects, both with municipalities and corporates. And then we expect that this year we actually will support. This program is unfortunately closed, but we will actually announce the next cohort when this will actually open. But this year we expect to support more than 20 companies to run 3 pilots. And last but not least, the most important one, and the reason why we're here today, is investments, where we actually run investments up to 100K for startups in exchange of equity. And as from last year, when we first started to realize equity investments, we actually have closed 14 investments. 12 of them were actually closed in 2020, and we are actually planning to realize up to 15 investments all along 2021. I will make a hard stop here, Tom, just in case someone wants to raise any questions.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. One question I had. So I know one of our apart from the Connected Mobility Hub, obviously, we're investors in smart mobility ourselves at Startup Labs and Ionic, and I know at least one of our startups has been through. I think it was the acceleration program. It was Ciclo Green, and they were really happy with the support you gave. And from the questions we've seen, there seems to be more focus on the sort of the support in terms of business development, perhaps an investment. Obviously, both things are of great interest. Could you give us you gave us an example earlier of the company that was working in Milan. Could you maybe just give us an example of one of the companies that's been supported with a corporate, if you're able to, so that people can see it more, so that they have a real success story to grab hold of?
Well, so to be honest, Tom, for let's say confidentiality reasons, and I am very, let's say, tied up when it comes to the information that I can actually provide. But nevertheless, of course, what we normally do is, of course, like the main scope of supporting and enabling these relationships with corporates is to both expand their business lines. Second, to of course promote entrepreneurship within their different departments. And last but not least is because we are attracting a lot of investments from corporate venture capitals to actually embark and seize the momentum in the transition to this collaboration and open innovation process with startups. So unfortunately, I cannot actually disclose this, secret sauce that we have between the companies and the corporates. But I will definitely say that this is one of our top, I will say, requirements from this side, and they are very much keen on working specifically on challenge-based approaches.
And actually, there is one thing that hasn't been mentioned in much detail, but that I think adds to that answer. Is the partners involved inside the EIT Urban Mobility. I can't remember how many there are, but there are a large number, and they. Okay, here we go. And there are a large number, and a lot of them are corporate. So obviously, they're actually indirectly making investments in the first place. So obviously, they'd be interested in supporting the startups.
Absolutely, Tom. And by by providing an example, I can also say that one of our most, let's say, frequent activities is to run matchmaking events with our corporates. And for instance, in the past 2 months, we have actually run matchmaking sessions with Achmea, which is one of the top and largest insurers in the Netherlands. And we have also run different matchmaking sessions with CF Ventures, which is one of the largest, electric companies and renewable energy companies in the north as well. So, of course, we have, a number of upcoming initiatives, and we are very happy with the overall results, because as a result of these matchmaking events, there are ongoing conversations, both for capital rising, of course, and second, for procurement and for commercialization agreements. So, of course, this says that there is a strong alignment and a lot of appetite from CVCs and corporates to engage and work on a steadily basis with startups and scale-ups.
And I've just put, Jaime, we'll put your question up on screen and answer it in a second. But just on that one point that maybe people aren't or maybe they've just realized it. But one point that I think is really interesting there is that often a startup has access to a certain degree to the corporates within their country, because of open innovation programs or contacts or accelerators, whatever it be. But there you've just mentioned 2 corporates from Northern Europe, and obviously, both you and I are based in Southern Europe. Well, that's something that access is something that's extremely difficult for a company to achieve from outside the geographic territory or the geographic headquarters of the corporate. But programs such as yourselves facilitate to a large extent. So,
absolutely, Tom. And this is actually, one again. After all, EIT Urban Mobility is, a result of its strong network, and therefore we always capitalize on them. We work for them. We actually, enable our, we really cater to their own needs, being it corporates, municipalities, or startups and scale-ups, and it gets growing. And we have when we actually said that we are pan-European, we are truly pan-European. So we have presence from east to west, from north to south, and we also have roots in the US as well, through some other key partners strategically there. So when it comes to our network, this is the real added value of EIT Urban Mobility. The rest is, we are just here to connect the dots, and we have a lot of expertise in thematic areas to support the next generation of tech mobility ventures.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Well, I'll without more ado, I'll put Jaime's question. It cuts me. I'm off the screen now, so you can see it, right?
Yes,
Pablo? Yeah,
yes,
okay,
I can read that. Hi, Jaime. So the investment decision process is basically based on the merits from the companies, and I will say that EIT Urban Mobility is gaining credibility, awareness, and popularity across the pan-European landscape. But of course, there is competition, but it has to be both the impact that the company has in the societal landscape, and of course it has to be aligned with our SDGs, and is precisely addressed in the Q&A, in the facts document, and in the actual, description of the Startup Investment Open Call. But we will primarily base our investment decision on the actual, potential of the team, metrics, and alignment with our SDGs. So we are looking for, of course, a financial return, but also a societal and environmental return.
Fantastic. And as you say, on a pan-European basis, really allowing us to compete with as best we can with the Americans and the Chinese.
Exactly. Yeah, making the United States of Europe this case.
Exactly. The politicians can't, we can as in business. So.
Absolutely. So let me just conclude my presentation with the actual, the total number of companies that have been supported since 2020. And these are not equity companies, but these are the total number of companies that have been supported by business creation programs and by each innovation hub. So the breakdown, as you can see, is pretty balanced. We have 14 companies supported by Innovation Hub North, and 19 in the East, 18 in the South, 9 in the West, and 21 in Central. If you want actually to see which are the core partners in each of our innovation hubs, I'll be glad to share this presentation after the conclusion of this of the session. And in terms of programs, and 40 companies have actually graduated from the Startup Accelerator and 15 from the Scale Up Hub. These, of course, were the numbers prior to the kickoff of the programs in 2021. And Scale Up and Go Global have now merged, and they are now Scale then Global. So these numbers are a little bit redundant. Finance to Move is the actual program that realizes startup investments, and the COVID-19 Accelerator is actually an exceptional and extraordinary program that was run last year because of the impact of the pandemic. And COVID-19 grants is basically a formula that we used last year using a model called Grant for Equity, which this year is not scheduled. But if the situation changes, and we will duly announce it through our channels. And I don't think that I actually want to, because this is a very broad presentation, and I want to make it as live and as interactive as it can be. So I really, thanks, Irina. I just read the United States of Europe. So, Tom, how would you like to move on from here?
Well, I think to me at least it's quite clear. But obviously, I've been here for the last half hour, so those people that haven't been here for the last half hour should jump in with any questions. But I think it's pretty clear. It's a convertible note. Could be direct equity, but theoretically, it's a convertible note as co-investment between 50 and 100K. You're looking for 2 to 5% of equity. You don't necessarily want to be lead investor, but you could be the largest investor in a particular round. Okay, you've got the whole thing there. Okay, you've got the whole. Okay, Irina's asked a question. I didn't put her United States of Europe because I thought we were going into political territory, so it wasn't something to put on screen. But here she's asked about impact, so I will, Irina. I am completely in agreement actually in the whole idea of a United Europe. As somebody that lives in southern Spain from the UK with a Dutch mother, I couldn't be anything else. But yeah, if you could talk about the impact connected to SDGs.
Sure. So when we actually said that we actually need to match the SDGs, is the social development goals, and therefore, and when we actually evaluate let's say the different fields, such as the team, the business model, the scalability, financials, and so on, we also have like it has a significant weight on the final decision, the actual SDGs contribution. So, needless to say that when we actually become shareholders of companies, is because we aim to have this double return investment, where we actually target financial returns, but also positive environmental and social impacts. So it's important for entrepreneurs, and if you are considering to apply for this instrument, that you actually emphasize on how do you actually tackle and how do you actually solve the most let's say common challenges in the pan-European markets, because the ultimate goal of EIT Urban Mobility is to actually create public realm in European cities. So this is something that I eagerly encourage entrepreneurs, because we are not, as I said before, a pure financial investor. We actually need to tap into this double return investment thesis.
That actually brings a question for me that others might have. Is this compatible with, for example, EIC Accelerator funding, and you know that is very focused on sort of impact and impact orientated metrics and technologies? Is it compatible? I mean, can a company, we have right now got a company, one of our startups that's just been accepted into EIC Accelerator. They're looking at the equity, and now it has both grants and equity. They're looking at both the grants and equity side. Is it compatible? Are the two sources of funding compatible?
Sure. I mean, Tom, not only compatible, I would say that this is desirable, because we are actually working side by side with the other EIF, which is the European Investment Fund, with the European Investment Council, which is the EIC, and also with other European institutions to really, cross support the companies that they actually select for funding, for support services. And of course, this seal of excellence that companies reach when being eligible, or when becoming beneficiaries for granting and for support services under the umbrella of EIC. Of course, we are more than delighted to actually, have a look at those specific projects, because needless to say that our peers from the EIC have a lot of, expertise and focus on creating the next generation of zebras companies, as we label them, and we are really interested in those ones as well. And there is no double funding criteria here, meaning that if you have raised, let's say, 1 million from the EIC and then you apply for our startup investments, it's absolutely fine. There is no cannibalization whatsoever.
Okay, fantastic. And I can see that there are two questions have come in. Another one from Irina and this one from Jonathan.
So, Jonathan, there is no B2G business model. I mean, we are not primarily interested in B2G companies, because normally, like, the time frames and the, let's say, and the processes to actually get the first market validation is significantly more delayed than when actually facing B2C or B2B2C business models, and B2B, of course. So we are not discarding companies operating in that field, but or with that business model as the core business model of the company. But of course, we are also like evaluating more positively companies that, in addition to B2G, can also work on B2B and B2B2C business models.
Okay, and then Irina had another question.
So Irina, we are actually happy to say that in the description of our startup mobility, urban mobility startup investments, we are actually eagerly encouraging, female-led companies to apply, because The equality between men and women is a core value for our community, and we support the adoption of the EIT's gender mainstream policy and its impact in the knowledge triangle. So we are strongly focusing and, of course, invigorating the community of female-led entrepreneurs to actually apply for our startup investments. And so far, the equity portfolio is represented by, the number of companies led by female founders is representing, as of today, more than 24% in our equity portfolio. So we are really tackling diversity.
Okay, that's a large percentage. I think in our entire portfolio as investors, we've got about 10%, and we actually often favour, well, we do favour often female founders. They tend to be slightly better at capital efficiency than men. They're talking about zebras rather than unicorns, for example. Okay, so let's just go through we've got 5 more minutes. Shall we just go through this summary that you have on screen, so that for those people that arrive late?
So basically, I'm just going to share. I think that I will actually share the Q&A. Sorry, the FAQ questions. Yes. Okay. Let me share my screen again.
Cool.
This is a screen too. Please let me know if you can see that at a decent scale.
If I put it full screen, I can certainly on my laptop. So.
Okay, let me zoom it a little bit more. I'll go to 150.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so we didn't mention it, but of course it's somehow understandable that we are investing primarily in the very early stage and pre-seed, seed, and eventually growth. And we are also including growth because depending on the actual, company where the company is applying from, the manufacturing cost can be a little bit, cheaper or lower, and therefore the overall company valuation can also be lower. That's why we are eventually investing in growth as well. But as long as the company is below, again, the pre-money valuation is set below 8 million euros. So we are looking for European companies, and again, Horizon Europe associated countries that are disrupting the urban mobility landscape, operating in areas characterized by rapid growth rate and within the B2B and B2B2C business models. So needless to say that we believe that a company that is already fundraising, and we are actually looking for market traction, international vision, and scalability in the business model and its technology. So we are looking for double return investments, and thus the operations, products, or services of the applicant, must contribute positively to at least one of the SDGs. So if you want any further information regarding whether your core, let's say, USP is actually challenging or addressing the SDGs, please just have a look in the main website, and you will have a very straightforward response to this. So the typical investment, we already said that from 50,000 to 100,000 euros. And this is the key question that I actually want to address, because we have received a sizable volume of applications, and therefore we are actually looking to co-invest. And the company, therefore, must be currently fundraising or preferably in an ongoing funding round with capital committed from other investors. So this, Tom, I really want to emphasize that, because we have received more than 60 applications for now, but only a few of them have actually, become eligible after, providing their responses, because not many of them were currently in a fundraising round or in a fundraising moment.
That's an interesting point there. But so one, those companies that have applied, that maybe some of them are seeing this, that aren't in a fundraising round, obviously should look at raising some funds if they're interested in continuing with yourselves. But it's also an interesting point in terms of do you as EIT Urban Mobility then assist the companies to find co-investors? Or proactively, or do you just respond to them saying that you find some co-investors and come back to us? What?
Well, it's normally the other way around, Tom. What we actually want is, of course, if a company is starting now to look for funding, we can actually provide a conditional selection for investment based let's say depending on the actual, closure of the round, bringing other accredited co-investors. So if let's say that one company is actually saying, hey, Pablo, we are currently fundraising, but we expect to close the round by, let's say, the first fortnight of September, then we can make a conditional investment selection. And then when the actual term sheet is in place, when we actually see that there are some capital committed from other co-investors, where we have letter of intents or soft and hard commitments from other investors, this is when we actually can become, let's say, we can formalize our investment by signing the term sheet, the convertible note, the SAFE, or any other investment agreement.
Yeah, okay, a little bit like ANISA does in Spain, for example. Well, then I have an interesting point there, is that because we're organizing our annual Smart Mobility investor event for the end of September, if there are companies that apply that don't have co-investors, well, it would be great if you could say to them, well, look, they should apply for our event, because that event is specifically focused on generating investors, private investors, which could then, and they could then, if they were to do so, they could then close the investment ticket with yourselves also.
Absolutely, Tom. Yes, and again, that's why I made an overview of the whole business creation programs, because if a company does not qualify for the startup investments, we also have additional programs such as the Startup Accelerator, such as the Scale Then Global, and last but not least, access to finance, where we can actually support the companies in their fundraising as well. And of course, with market introductions, with access to our municipalities and corporates. So I'm not saying that if a company does not qualify for the startup investments, they have to give up. No, we are here, and we remain committed to support the company regardless of whether they are currently fundraising or fundraising at a later stage.
Fantastic. Irina asked one question, but Irina, this is such a, I mean, it's a really interesting point you make there. I think it's quite a long one to go into, but it's certainly very interesting looking at the inclusion of people in services. I think that's interesting from a female perspective, from a disabled perspective, from a blind. So blind or obviously physically disabled, but from the people that are deaf, blind. I actually have a son that's autistic. There's a huge area of people that sometimes find it difficult to be included, or have difficulties being included in some of these services. And I'm sure that's probably, actually, I'm not great with SDGs, but I'm sure it's included in one of the SDGs, certainly, isn't it? Social inclusion.
Absolutely, you are right, and Tom, and thanks, Irina, for raising this. As I said, and when we actually talk about the SDGs, and it's listed here. You have I think 17 different chapters, and in most of them, you see, there we go, and you see that we have climate action, we have sustainable cities and communities, reduced inequality. And of course, this includes not only underdeveloped regions, but also underdeveloped, let's say, social status and so on. And therefore, we are eagerly and positively contributing and, let's say, empowering applications for which are tackling these different SDGs. And needless to say that a company can actually have SDGs contribution in more than one SDG.
Yeah. To be fair, I would assume most do if they actually try to tackle these things. Anyway, let's just go back to the FAQs, because we're 3 minutes overdue, and
sure.
and we'll just finish. Sorry, the FAQs, and we'll just finish off with
absolutely. So, just to conclude, needless to say that if we actually syndicate with other business angels and VCs, absolutely yes, this is the primary goal of these co-investment schemes, and therefore we are looking, to co-invest with investor, because it improves the overall marketability, the providing additional source of capital to actually increase the amount of capital without incurring any additional fees. And for companies, it reduces this refinancing risk by raising larger funding rounds. and building a broader investor list to lift upcoming funding events. And again, I already presented this slide saying like, business development, legal support, divestment, and follow-on investment. And therefore, we actually add value way beyond capital investments because of, as I eagerly emphasize, we have an extensive network of investors, corporate partners, and municipalities to support our portfolio companies, not only with capital, but with fast-track access to our shareholders, stakeholders, sorry. And I don't really want to, take more of your precious time in here. Tom, I don't know if you want to share any closing remarks or additional questions for this.
Well, no. What I think we'll do is if you could add into comments in on the post, so the post turns into this session the way LinkedIn do it now. If you could add in the comments the links to the documentation, so that everybody's got access to it there, I think that would be useful. And if anybody's has any additional questions, okay, you've got them there. So fantastic. What I'll do is I'll take them, I'll add them into the, I'll actually add them in and your email. Do I add your email into the post as well?
Yes, it's okay. Included. If you open the first URL, it already has like a mail to option to directly and reach out to me.
Okay, fantastic. Well, what I'll do is I'll actually add that I'll edit the post right now, and I'll add those things into the bottom of the post. So those that are watching it in real time will see that I'm doing that at this moment. And there you've got all your details now in 1 second. I'll click on save, and there it is. So anybody that's watching this live now, if they go onto the if they actually go onto the post, if they look up in the contents of the post, they'll see that you've got those links and your email. So fantastic, Pablo. Thank you very much for this. I think it's very, very useful for the community. I'm sure more people will see this later on as well. And somebody's just put in a quite a large comment. You can't see either of us now, but if you could. No, they're not actually asking a question. They're really just it's sort of a guerrilla marketing. So anyway, what we'll do, anybody that has any questions will feel free to get in touch with us. Feel free to get in touch with Pablo. Anybody that's applied to EIT Urban Mobility that doesn't have co-investors, do bear in mind that we have this investor event, our annual investor event as the Connected Mobility Hub at the end of September. We tend to bring in about 110 specialized smart mobility investors. That's everything from corporates to business angels to small to early stage funds to later stage funds. And feel free to get in touch with either Pablo and myself, or obviously EIT Urban Mobility or Connected Mobility Hub. We'll happily send you the information or help out in any way, shape, or form we can. And with that, I will click. Unless you want to say something more, I'll click on end broadcast and
well, Tom, I just wanted to thank you, and of course, all the activities empowered by and really fostering this, ecosystem, not only in the south of Spain, but in a pan-European level, that is Connected Mobility Hub doing. And on a private note, I really look forward to realize the first co-investment with you guys. So let's enable that.
Fantastic. Let's do it. Okay, cool.
All right.
All right. Cheers, then. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.